What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield back with us in the DraftKings studios in Boston. We are brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% of your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. Got a great show for you guys. As always, download, subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out live here, DraftKings YouTube, DraftKingsNetwork.com, and Samsung TV Plus, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Kenny Albert going to join us here, fresh off calling the NFL game in London between the Bills and the Jags. He's also got hockey coming up as we start the NHL season. He's got a book coming out, but we've got Jessie returning from IR with us. She is back here and she is healthy. And we've got my father fresh off a heater last night out in Vegas getting ready for Monday Night Football. Dad, you were in your glory last night. I get a text as I'm laying down for bed to get up early to do this show. I'm on Pacific time, so I'm usually in bed pretty early because I'm up at 4 o'clock Pacific to get ready to do this live with you guys. And I get a text right as I'm ready to lay down my head on the pillow. I'm up $400 right now. You sicko.
Yeah. And you're the only one I could text. I couldn't text your mother because it was late. So I'm like, I got to text somebody because I got here to call the game tonight, Vegas and Green Bay. And it was later. So I had to go down and get a couple of these power bar things for the morning because nothing going on at between 4 and 5 in the morning for me to go get any kind of breakfast. So I'm like, I'm down here. I'll go gamble a little bit. Next thing you know, I'm going from machine to machine. All the blackjack tables were full. I was ticked off. So I'm going on machines, which I'm enjoying more and more. Next thing you know, I'm winning. And I'm winning. I'm happy. I text you. I go to bed, and now I'm jerry rigging my setup here as well. So it's been an interesting trip already. I've only been here about 8 hours.
Yeah, that's an ice bucket, right? That is on top of your little pile that the microphone's in.
On top of my little pile, yes. It's interesting. You guys have told me, since I have to do shows on the road, take an Ethernet cord, and usually there's an Ethernet plug so you can hardwire in, so that helps with the connection and all that. And they have a great panel here on the wall that has all kind of inputs, including an Ethernet. And a couple of weeks ago, I did the show with it, and it didn't work. So this time around, I called down to engineering, and I said, listen, you got the panel here, the Ethernet, all the inputs. Can you tell me what I need to do I know it's not just a plug-in, because that's what I did a couple of weeks ago. They're like, oh, those things haven't worked in like a decade. I'm like, oh, okay, they're just for show then. They said, yeah, once, Wi-Fi is around now, so we don't use any of those anymore. So I'm like, okay. So, we're going to keep our fingers crossed that the Wi-Fi holds here, of which they flat out told me this is horrible Wi-Fi and it may not hold up. So we got that going for us. And I have a handheld mic, but I like to have my hands free to A, talk, and B, look for information. So I had to figure out a way to jerry rig. So I have the ironing board with the tissue box on the ironing board and the ice bucket on the tissue box and the microphone in the ice bucket. So that's how I have the mic close enough, because it's got to be close enough to my mouth. So that is my jerry rigging for this particular situation.
That's about as handy as my dad's ever going to get, trying to put together this tower of adult Lincoln Logs so that he can spew takes about whatever the hell we watched in Sunday Night Football last night. Because as ugly as that setup sounds, it ain't nearly as ugly as what the Dallas Cowboys put on display in a 42-10 loss to the San Francisco 49ers. Dad, there was there was nothing redeeming about this for the Cowboys. That was as defeated a group of people as I've ever seen. Obviously, during the game, but post-game, everybody sounded shell-shocked here. Dad, it got to the point where I just sat around thinking during the course of this beatdown that really at no point looked competitive for the Dallas Cowboys, and asked myself, is there anything the Cowboys can do at this point to buy back people's faith, to make them believe that this team is actually capable of being a Super Bowl contender this season? Because while their schedule might still present challenges, they obviously play in the NFC East with the Eagles, who are also going to be in this conversation. This kind of ass whooping on the national stage, combined with the fact that this 49ers team did the same thing to you in the postseason last year, feels like the kind of stick to your ribs goodness that's going to be around for a while.
Yeah, actually the last 2 years they knocked them out. So the only thing you can really hang your hat on, listen, the 49ers are a better team, and they showed that, is the fact that why do we have series in the other, or there's series in the other sports, right? And normally what happens in a series is the best team ends up shining through. Well, in football, you have one game. So that, quite honestly, is the hope that you play great and you need San Francisco to make mistakes. That's what you can hang your hat on. And, oh, by the way, that happens. That nobody plays a perfect game, though San Francisco is certainly trying to. So maybe you catch him in an off day. But when you match up head-to-head, like they were talking early on, boy, if Micah Parsons lines up at right end a lot and goes against Trent Williams a lot, what a matchup to see. That was no matchup. That was you had to start.
And why did they keep going back to it? Why would you do that to him? Line him up on the bad guys.
Listen, and Micah Parsons could win Defensive Player of the Year quite possibly this year, but Trent Williams, I mean, is a walk-in Hall of Fame. And now that doesn't mean you don't put your best guy up against him. But man, that's one of those I'd move him around, and they started to moved him off the ball like a regular linebacker, rushing up the middle. He was slipping blocks on the other side. But when he was going one-on-one in Trent Williams, that was kind of like the game. It was a no-go. I mean, there was nothing happening. This San Francisco team, they're right there, I think, with Philly, obviously, and KC is you'd probably say they're the best because they're the most complete. They're a team that, as I said, would like them to make some mistakes. You can't count on that. So much so that in 5 games, their opening drives are 4 touchdowns and a field goal. I mean, They're jumping out with points on their first drive in every single game. So immediately, you're finding yourself, if you didn't score in your first drive before they had the ball, you're down right away against this juggernaut of an offense, and then forget the defense. I mean, how many times last night was Collinsworth talking about Warner and Greenlaw, those linebackers, and that D-line. Greenlaw I've covered them a couple of times too. Dude's feisty. I mean, and there was nothing Dallas could do in this game. You kept, it was to the point where I don't have a rooting interest in this one. And a lot of people think, oh, you want Dallas to lose because you were in Philly most of the year, you hate them. I don't care. I don't care. But I found myself, and I was watching most of this game on the plane going, man, please score, make this a game. I mean,
do something.
It's 28-10, and I'm like, okay. And then the long bomb interception, and then the interception, when the ball gets hit on the receiver's hand on the drive after that, and it's 42-10.
And you know what? The floodgates clearly came off in the second half. Like Kyle Shanahan, I know going into the halftime locker room, said he was ticked off because they didn't score on every drive in the first half. He thought they left points out there. And like Michael Jordan, he took that personally and decided to go and cave their heads in all second half. But Dad, you look at that first half, and we're trying to figure out where it went wrong for the Cowboys. I've got to lay the vast majority of the blame at the feet of the offense, because going up against a team as complete as the San Francisco 49ers, the one thing is you got to be able to go out there and score points. And of the first 4 drives for the Dallas Cowboys, there was only one that actually went beyond 3 plays. 4 of their first 5 possessions were 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, fumble given up there, that if the Cowboys defense doesn't force a fumble of their own, is going to lead directly to points, Dad. The idea of complementary football was totally out of whack. The Cowboys offense was serving their defense short fields and short rest periods, going up against one of the best offenses in the league. If you get the 49ers to punt 3 or 4 times out of their first 7 possessions in the first half, that should be enough to give your offense a chance to go, and is really the expectation I had. They're not going to shut them out based on what this offense has been, especially when it's that lopsided from one side to the other in terms of the help that the offense is giving the defense.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You need to be in the game from the jump, because, San Francisco is going to jump out and do what they do. So you have to hold score with them. And to boot, as you mentioned, not only were you not, but they were 3 and outs. I mean, so your defense was back on the field again. This game, the closest it got was in the second half, about halfway through, was that nice long pass to Turpin, and it's 14-7. Because you're thinking it's 14 zip, and the way San Francisco was going is like, you were like, uh-oh. And that's what it turned out to be. But Dallas at least gets that score with about 7 or 8 minutes left in the half. And you're like, okay, all right. It was a big play. They haven't really established a whole lot, but big play, and they get it to within a touchdown. And then 21-7, 21-10, 28-10, the rest is history, 42-10. You're right. That's the thing. You have to keep pace with that offense. So that's the question. Who can keep pace with that offense? Because, oh, by the way, the best defense in the league is with San Francisco. So, I mean, they can stop you as well as hurt you on offense. So, I mean, they're the best team right now. It's they and Philadelphia on a direct collision course, because we talk about the NFC being top heavy, and it is San Francisco, it is Philly, and then we had Dallas there. Let's see what Detroit can do, and what any other NFC team we can have. It's always the AFC we talk about with the depth, which we'll talk about. But man, I mean, this is just kind of clearly we're waiting for San Francisco and the 40 in the postseason. But by the way, we get them in the regular season, December 3rd.
Yeah, exactly. That one coming up very soon.
Yeah.
And to your point about other teams that might be in this same breath, because for the 49ers, it's how they do it on both sides. According to FTN and DVOA, their measure of efficiency over there, entering this week, there were 5 teams in the NFL that were top 10 in that metric in offense and defense. It was San Fran, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Detroit. Baltimore might take a little hit this week offensively, as might Buffalo, because of what went on in those games, but it is a tall order. We saw their stars show up early. Nick Bosa with a sack on one of those first drives. Fred Warner basically eating Dak Prescott alive on the perimeter of one of those plays. That man is a pterodactyl playing linebacker he covers so much space and so much ground. And it all does circle back, Dad, on the Cowboys side in some ways to Dak Prescott, who after the game got up at the podium and called this the most humbling loss he's been a part of.
Called a couple of weeks ago, humbling against Arizona. But this may be the most humbling game I've ever been a part of. Felt good about the preparation, felt good about everything, honestly, coming into this game, matchups, and they beat us in every aspect.
Dad, how worried does this game make you, or should it make Dallas fans about the future with Dak Prescott here in Dallas? Because in a game where they were matching up, where we talked about the matchup between him and Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, and all the polarizing conversation we can get to about Brock, Dak Prescott was coming into this as the one people looked at and said, this is the more talented guy. He's been highly paid. And 3 interceptions later, people are scratching their heads wondering what they're tied to now.
Well, that's exactly right, because Dak Prescott, we know what this team is every year. Every year, every team wants to win the Super Bowl, but, you know, Jerry Jones making his comments every year, Super Bowl or bust, Super Bowl or bust, and they haven't gotten close since 96 when they won those 3, 92, 93, 96, or 93. Yeah, those 3 years. So so it's twofold. It's he can't get them over the top. But like I talked about, like with Tony Romo, which is interesting because Dak took over for him, and you didn't know that was going to happen because Dak was a 4th rounder. But it's like, well, where are you going to go? Because the one thing you don't talk about with Dallas is a rebuilding year. Though that O-line is getting aged. We know that, right? With Smith and with Martin, and Biotish got hurt again last night. So you're kind of hanging on there with that. But they're never really in rebuild mode. They're just kind of retool mode. So I guess that would be the question. Where are you? What's your option? What do you do? Do you want to draft you're not going to be bad enough unless you trade a ton of assets to get a young quarterback. Are you going to bring in a free agent? Are they going to do better than Dak? So you're kind of like, and then there's the money situation as well.
I was going to say, oh, by the way, you never restructured any of that contract for next year. And so he's due about $60 million that you're going to have a tough time wielding. So all that put together kind of locks you in the room with the guy, Dad, who is only getting older, who doesn't look as fleet of foot as he used to here. And now in the body of Mike McCarthy's offense, which has been playing well this season, which has been putting up a ton of points going into the year. But when you held it up in the light and you had its direct foil across the other side of the San Francisco offense that does so much to try and free players up and get them open in space, and then you looked at a Dallas offense that comparatively looked slow, Dad. I think that was the biggest takeaway for this team, was even the defense that had been this incredibly athletic ball of knives, every part of the Cowboys operation compared to every part of the 49ers operation looks slower and less physical. And that, as the baseline for this game, is why it went the way it did, is because the 49ers were, along the lines of scrimmage, the far more physical team. And overall, skill-wise, they looked like the much more dynamic team.
Yeah, they do. I agree on every count, because it's one of those where if the offense is going to do it, the defense needs to step up, and the defense couldn't step up against this offense. The offense, while they're, I think, right on the fringe of top 10 running the ball, they still need to be better running the ball. They can't be one-dimensional, so they need to be that mixture, you know, now with Pollard being the featured back there. So, yeah, to go full circle to your first question, I don't – they're not good enough playing on a level playing field to be the best team in the NFL right now. But as
No.
I said, you get one game in the playoffs and you have to kind of hope for some things to happen, create some turnovers, which they could do, even though Trayvon Diggs, their biggest guy that does that, is out for the year. So I don't know where they're going. Again, they'll be near the top. They'll battle Philadelphia for the division title, but we know for Dallas, it's not enough. Like I said, every team wants to win the Super Bowl, but we know where Dallas is. It's not enough. It's like that next step. We need that next step. And it's going to be difficult to do in a very uninspiring, non-deep NFC, which is basically 3 teams deep until another team proves who's the 4th team right now in the NFC. Is it Detroit?
Yeah, it's probably Detroit.
So it's really those 3 teams battling out. And I think right now, San Fran, at least because they proved it, is well ahead of Dallas. And we're Philadelphia, another undefeated team, keep stepping in. And you can't say enough about San Francisco. Mike, I still can't believe that Christian McCaffrey has scored in, 14 straight games? The dude has barely been in San Francisco, and he scored in 14 straight games. He's 1 away from tying the record. What is it? O.J. Simpson, John Riggins, and Lenny Moore all scored in 15 consecutive games. I mean, it's crazy.
It's been insane. And for their offense, Dad, the question's going to come about him and Brock Purdy, George Kittle. Everyone was firing on all cylinders in this game. Jesse, I know Brock Purdy's MVP odds took a big jump last night.
Yeah, it's Mr. Irrelevant is literally anything but irrelevant at this point. His odds took a huge jump. He went from plus 2,200 to plus 700. He has the 3rd best odds now, behind only Mahomes and Tua. Guys, think about this. He's literally tied with Josh Allen. Did you think you'd be saying that?
No, I didn't. Dad, this was one of those games that the primetime effect certainly takes over to some extent, but these were also some of Brock Purdy's most impressive throws of the season. Some of the stuff he did off script, laying balls in perfect spots. It was the normal stuff that we see inside this offense. And quite frankly, the conversation around him's been the normal stuff we've seen around guys working in this offense. It's not just the undrafted thing. We've done this with Tua and Mike McDaniel, especially because he came over there at a different juncture in Tua's career. But the bottom line is now you cannot deny the effectiveness. He has been on an unholy tear since he got to San Francisco and shows no signs of stopping. I don't think I'd still have him inside the top 5 list of quarterbacks in the NFL, but the guy's playing at the very least like a top 10 quarterback right now. And within the confines of this offense, George Kittle mentioned it after the game talking with Scott Van Pelt. They're asked to do a lot. There are a lot of moving parts to this offense, and you've got to know as the quarterback where and how everything fits together. And when you combine that with the timing and accuracy he's displayed so far, you get one of the best quarterback seasons we've seen. If he keeps this up, he's going to stay in this MVP conversation because especially of how the award works.
Yeah, deservedly so. I mean, the Chiefs and the Dolphins, I think, are the 3 teams that do the most movement before a play. That's what this offense does. And what everybody wants to do to Brock Purdy is say, well, look at all the weapons he has. And by the way, that is part of the equation. He has a ton of weapons. But, Chris Collinsworth talked about it last night, and I talked about it when I was calling his games at Iowa State. One of his biggest attributes is the neck up. He played a lot in college, and that certainly helps. But his ability to diagnose where he wants to go with the ball. You ask any quarterback, and it's how quickly can you make that decision of basically where you want to go with the ball, whether it's pre-snap or a second after post-snap, because now you've seen what the coverage is and know where you want to go. Now, there are times his guys are wide open, but there are times he is threading the needle. And I've always said there's different completions. There's a completion that, the wide receiver running back catches the ball and then he's down. He throws a guy to where they can keep going yards after the catch. So he makes quick decisions. He gets the ball to the right guy, and he throws a great ball. He's doing it all right now.
He is, and to your point, that offense is designed around getting their receivers opportunities to run after the catch, and he has made that possible for Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. It was all working last night, but coming up next, revenge, a dish best served cold in New York next.
It was a special game for Hack, obviously being here a year ago. Racked up over 400 yards on him.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jesse Cofield. It is time to hear some sounds from around NFL Sunday for Mic'd Up Monday, presented by Wrangler. So let's start with the Hackett revenge game. All right, Jets played the Broncos yesterday, and we all know that this was a personal one, given Sean Payton's training camp comments about, Hackett, where he said the 2022 Broncos were, who were coached by Hackett, undermined by one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. Those were some fighting words. Everybody knew that this was a personal game, okay? And after the game, Coach Saleh acknowledged that it was meaningful for Hackett.
It was a special game for Hack, obviously being here a year ago. Racked up over 400 yards on him. Put up 31 points, so I'm happy for him.
It was good, to be honest. Like, we mostly for Coach Hackett, I wasn't really worried about myself today. It was just, he stayed quiet, he stayed humble, respectful. So we wanted to come in and get a win today for him, and we did that. Better coach, better team won.
Whether he said much this week about it or not, I know it means a lot, and it meant a lot to this team for him.
The players were fired up, and Aaron Rodgers got in on it too with this little tweet. Hashtag Hackett, heart, and then another hashtag. So just some, you can tell that the players were as fired up by this as I'm sure Hackett was behind closed doors.
Oh, I have to imagine they said the most evil things about Sean Payton behind closed doors in this game. You saw some of it leak out on the field before the game. I forget which one of the Jets players got out there and was talking about the way he talked about our coach. Well, F him and F them. We're going to go out there and take care of business. Dad, this was as deeply personal as I feel like I've seen an NFL team treat a win in a long time. And make no mistake, it was a slugfest between two largely bad teams. This Broncos defense is historically bad so far this season. And the Jets offense took their sweet time outside of Breece Hall dominating this team the way that they probably should have with Zach Wilson at the helm. But that had to feel pretty damn good for Nathaniel Hackett, who I think I saw getting to swap some stories with guys from the Broncos that he clearly coached last year. They probably miss all of the Austin Powers jokes and were getting their fill of those after the game. But congrats to him on getting the dub.
Listen, Mike, you know the locker room, man. You're with those guys more than you're with your family at times. And it could be a close-knit group. Again, not everybody gets along with everybody, but it's like one of those things, we can mess with our guy. You don't mess with our guy. And Sean Payton certainly messed with their guy. So everybody, we go back to training camp when that was said, circle this week 5 matchup to say what would happen. And as you're right, these are two overall bad teams, but that didn't matter in this game. This was about, backing Nathaniel Hackett if you're with the Jets, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and sticking into the face of someone who publicly went after your guy. And you do everything you can. As I said, bulletin board material works up till kickoff. And this was going to be, it wasn't the greatest game in the world, but I picked this as in the Golic thing we did last week, I picked it as the ick game. And by competitiveness, it was pretty good. Denver's got the ball, down a touchdown, trying to, or even up the, or down 3, I should say, trying to even up the game until Russell Wilson gets the ball knocked out of his hand for his second fumble. And Bryce Hall, not to be confused with Breece Hall, did an unbelievably athletic move, scooping that ball on the sideline and taking it to the house for the final points. But to be able to shove it back in someone's face, have that opportunity and do it, then you do it loudly. The game, wasn't questioned for a bit, but once you have that thing wrapped up, you start talking a whole lot of smack. And you know what? You can do it. You talk as much and as loud as you want, because that's exactly what Sean Payton did about that Denver team last year and what Hackett did.
You talk as much and as loud as you want within the confines of the matchup, because I think we all wondered if they'd be a lot better. Like, part of this was Sean Payton grossly miscalculated the dip on his own chip going into the season with how good his football team has been. Yes. And now he brought all that attention on them. And while the bulletin board material only lasts inside that locker room leading up, the attention that it brought to a Broncos team that is now confirmed big bad is something that's going to have a negative effect on them all season long. And for the Jets, their outcome still doesn't really change just because they got this win. Zach Wilson's still their quarterback. The season looks roughly like it did last year, where they don't in the AFC look like a playoff team and don't look like a team certainly capable of making that postseason run. But enjoy the feeling in the moment, talk that talk, and Nathaniel Hackett, I have a feeling, is going to do a really weird gold member impression to start the team meeting this upcoming week. Jesse, good feelings there, bad feelings inside that division elsewhere for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, don't think we're going to be seeing any Austin Powers impressions from Bill Belichick anytime soon. Just when you thought it really couldn't get worse for Patriots fans after last week, they followed up last week's loss by getting shut out by the Saints 31-0. That's right. Quarterback struggles continued. We saw Mac Jones get pulled in the fourth quarter. And here's some sad stats for Patriots fans. Yesterday was the first time Bill Belichick has trailed by 30 points at home in his head coaching career, including with his time in Cleveland. It was the second worst loss of his career. Last week's loss was the worst of his career. And it is so bad, in fact, that Bill Belichick just wants to wipe the slate clean.
All right, well, obviously it was a poor performance today here, so I mean, just plain and simply, we got to find a way to, play and coach better than that. And so that's what we're going to do, start all over and get back on a better track than we're on right now.
What does that entail, starting over?
Starting over.
So, guys, you heard Greg Bedard of Boston Sports Journal. He's the one who asked that follow-up question. And after the game, Bill's being Bill. He's saying, like, it entails what it entails, starting over. But Greg Bedard was saying they couldn't really hear any of his responses, and it was making it really hard to ask follow-up questions. Because Bill Belichick, when he walked up to the podium, the first thing he did was take the NFL mic and he took it out of the holder and just dropped it on the table. Just left
Established dominance. That's a classic Bill Belichick move, to come in and control the situation there and show everybody that while you may be down and your team may have only scored 3 points in their last 8 quarters, you are still the dominant force in this one. Dad, as far as changes that need to happen, I think the place that they've got to start is you got to think about benching Mac Jones at this point. You're just not getting any production out of that position. It seems lost. And Bailey Zappe's a guy that has come in at the end of the last 2 games. I know he, after the last game, defended Mac and said that he would be back out there. He just didn't want to get him hurt. But you got to do something to mix up the bag. At this point, Bailey Zappe is a guy that we saw get significant time last year at certain junctures. I still think the two of them is kind of a parent trap situation, but either way, feels like you got to do something, because this is spiraling right now to the point where even your defense that had been so good and so competent started getting pushed around. Again, similar to what happened with Dallas, because everything is so off kilter in terms of what your offense is providing in complementary football.
Yeah, you're just asked to do too much. In this case, they're asked to basically to do everything. First and really quick, Alvin Kamara, congratulations to him. He had a touchdown, all-time leading score, career leader in Saints in touchdown. So congrats to him.
Wow.
But yeah, I agree. I agree. That would be the place to start. That's the most important position on the field. It's getting them nothing right now, because when you say start over, you're starting over with the same guys in that locker room. That's it. That's all you have. So it's what you're going to shuffle there, and that's the shuffle that could at least have the biggest impact within the locker room. I don't think it's going to have much impact on the field, but you have to start somewhere.
You got to start somewhere with that. I don't know what else you're going to get, because I don't think you fire Bill Belichick. I don't think that's a conversation. Unless Bill wants to leave, I'm still not willing to go that far. So if you're going to bench the quarterback, Mac Jones is certainly not going to be the guy in 2020 or 2024 at this rate. And Bill O'Brien might not be the offensive coordinator in 2024 at this rate. We know where you start to go and the limbs you start to hack off before ultimately you get to that spot.
It's also interesting you mentioned, because after Jesse mentioned it, Bill taking the microphone and putting it down, you mentioned establishing dominance. It's not really big anymore, is it? It doesn't really. It's kind of losing its effect, isn't it? Of Bill establishing dominance. It's just that, listen, he's still one of the greatest coaches of all time. He walks into the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying anything about that. But as far as that dominance, it's not there. It's gone. I mean, it is completely gone to where they're going to be the worst team in that division, which what a lot of us thought anyway. So some of these power moves are going to get to the point of when you're putting rings on your finger, cool. When you're not, you start to roll your eyes a little.
When you're not, it looks a little petulant.
Yeah, when you're not, you're
Mission
in the
accomplished.
They're in right now. But coming up next, we got to get to one of the worst coaching decisions we've ever seen from college football this weekend. Next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. We will get to the reason Mike Ryan probably called in sick to the Levitard show today from the world of college football in just a second. But I forgot. I need to ask you guys this question, especially as married folks, because of what we saw at the end of the Cowboys 49ers game. Besides the football game that'll make people ask MVP questions about Brock Purdy and questions about the future in Dak Prescott and what he's truly capable of at this point. And spoiler alert, it does not seem to be lifting this offense beyond the sum of its parts. There was a moment after the game they showed in the broadcast where a man who was a 49ers fan appeared to propose successfully to his Dallas Cowboys girlfriend in the stands after that beatdown. Dad, this seems to be one of the more diabolically bad plans, but it was effective in its outcome here, which leads me to believe if you were to do that after this game in this kind of setting, this must be the truest love known to mankind, because if I were her in normal circumstances, I'd have been pissed and wondering why the hell you're asking me this after I just watched my team get shellacked by yours in what has to already be a contentious thing in that household.
So there's two married people out of the three of us, and the one thing I will say is, especially if you do it public. Now, I did not do it public. Jesse, I'm going to ask you in a second, but you ask when you know what the answer is going to be. And when you're doing it publicly, you damn well better know the answer is going to be yes. Now, that situation, you may have a peeved person you're asking there a little bit, but you still know in the big picture, yeah, the answer is going to be yes. I asked your mother in a car in a parking lot before a concert, but I knew she was going to say yes. I basically told her I had the ring. It was the worst engagement known to mankind. But I knew she was going to say yes, whether I did it in a car or I did it publicly somewhere. Jesse, was yours a public one, a private one? And there was no question, right? You were saying yes?
Yeah, there was no question I was saying yes. It was not like in our home or anything, but it was private. Like there wasn't people watching. There wasn't like a crowd or anything like that. But I just don't understand. I mean, these people are just different than me. I can't relate to this. I cannot relate to being okay with being proposed to. We can only imagine that they're drunk, that it's the end of the game. It's like I just can't relate to being in that situation and being like my future husband thinking that would be a good time to propose to me.
I do need someone to commission this study on the divorce rate of couples who have been proposed to in public. That's the kind of scientific service that we need there. So somebody get on that at GoJo and Golic on Twitter. Dad, in the meantime, we got to address what went on this weekend. We'll get to our football team, but Mario Cristobal is going to have one of the more uncomfortable weeks that a head coach has had in a while. The decision at the end of the game for Mario Cristobal and the Miami Hurricanes, they were up 3 points at the end of this game, with a chance to run out, they were up before that with a chance to run out the clock in this game. And they instead of kneeling on it, Miami had a 2017 lead with 33 seconds left on the clock. And Georgia Tech, who they had no business being in this close of a game with anyway, didn't have any timeouts left. But instead of kneeling down the clock and ending the game, Dad, they hand the ball off. Their running back gets stripped. Georgia Tech goes on a game-winning drive for the ages, and they're left holding the bag. I know this sounds weird coming from us because we had a team who put 10 men on the field twice in the pivotal game. But, Dad, I think given the circumstances, the fact that this was not ranked, given the fact that they controlled the outcome of victory in this game, it was certain victory that they snatched from the jaws of defeat and instead managed to do that for a guy that's also been a head coach for a good long time. This feels infinitely worse, although maybe I'm emotionally hedging for my own sake here.
No, it is worse because the outcome was in hand. You know, whether Notre Dame had 10 guys or 11 guys, Ohio State still had to run the play, and they just got over the goal line, but far enough, to have it be a touchdown. There still had to be a play run. The outcome was in doubt. In this case, you needed to be under 40 seconds. You needed to take a knee. It was third down. I believe it was third down. Take a knee. Game's over. I mean, the game is literally over. This is what every offensive person says is the best formation in football, and that's the victory formation. And that's exactly what Miami should have been in. Why they weren't, I have zero idea. I mean, I have to imagine, I have to think even the players, when the play came in, were like, what the hell were we doing? I almost...
No, there was a great shot of a Miami offensive lineman on the sideline going, what the F are we doing? Basically crying into his hands.
Yeah, I mean, you almost think like they should have handed off to the back, and the back maybe should have just fell down, and made it like a kneel down that way and not take the chance of getting touched by anybody. And Cristobal, after the game, said, he started getting into a little bit of an explanation about time and stuff, and then said we should have knelt on the ball, and they should have. So this is worse because the outcome was over. The game was over in a game. You're right, should not have been as close as it was, but yet it was. But all you had to do was get the ball to the quarterback to take a knee, and it was over. You got out of Dodge. You got one of those wins. You go to next week, and they blew it. And then give Georgia Tech credit for throwing the long pass for a touchdown. Again, how a guy gets behind the defense when they need to go long, that's a story for another day. That decision, one of the worst. I mean, it just seemed evident. It just almost seemed. I think it was Tim Hasselbeck doing the game, I believe, and he seemed kind of stunned at. Wait a minute. Wait. What are they doing? I mean, kneel on the ball.
And it's interesting coming off of last week, Notre Dame, after beating Duke, put out that video behind the scenes with the headset audio from all the coaches to kind of show people the communication that goes into a drive like that. And you saw some really interesting things about how they had the 2-point play picked out well ahead of time, and they were communicating through all of these parts and the coaching points of the circumstance. It really just served to underscore how many people are talking about the thing that you're getting ready to do on any given play on the field, how much preparation goes into that. And Dad, it makes it all the more maddening here. Mario Cristobal is obviously going to wear this because he's the head coach, but so many people had a chance to voice and say, hey, why don't we kneel on this? Why don't we get in on this? They're all talking on the headset. And the fact that a whole coaching staff full of people all didn't look up at some point and say, oh, that's right. Wait, we can just kneel on this and get out of this, has to be the part that maybe hurts even worse for everyone this morning. Because again, Mario Cristobal, that's a stain that's going to last for a good long time. All the recruiting he's done in Miami, all the things that we thought they had turned around in the lead up to this game as they were getting ready. This is a classic look ahead because they got North Carolina and Clemson coming up. And instead, what we got in this moment was something that's going to live with him for a long time, maybe forever, because it's as meme-worthy and inexplicable as anything we've ever seen. There were also a number of other people who had a chance to help him out here and didn't.
But you wonder if they did, right? I mean, it's probably not going to come out. I mean, that's the thing about it. I mean, I don't think there's going to be anybody that says, I told him, he shouldn't have done that. He should have knelt on it. I think the only person that would be able to say that, and I was surprised and now I didn't hear the whole press conference, that question wasn't asked, was, hey, did anybody say anything that you shouldn't be doing this? Did anybody try and talk you out of it? Because Mario Cristobal is going to be the only one really that would bring that up.
He did, when asked about this, said, I'm not going to make an excuse for it, say we should have done this or that. That's it. We should have done it. Sometimes you get carried away with just finish the game and run it. I should have stepped in and said, hey, take a knee. So that does sound like maybe a bit of looking at the offensive coordinator and saying, oh, this wasn't my decision, but I should have stepped in, which we'll see how that goes over this weekend. But either way, Dad, that's the kind of moment that has a chance to send your season spiraling completely out of control if you're not careful inside that locker room, because for a player, you all notice that stuff, right? We talked about this a bit with the Notre Dame and 10 men on the field. The players, at least in that situation, have partial ownership over it. This one, the play's coming in and you're looking over to the sideline and then you're waiting to hear the explanation after, going, what the hell just went on here?
Yeah, and you're right. So that answer makes it sound like it was called in by the coordinator, but ultimately it falls on the head coach, right? There were a couple of plays in the Notre Dame game where we were a little suspect with the call that were going on, and it ultimately can come down to the head coach and say, no, we're not doing that. In this one, for sure, the head coach and Mario Cristobal could step in and say, absolutely not. Let's kneel on the ball. What are we doing? So this was a horrible, horrible gaffe that, you're right, we'll see what kind of ramifications it's going to have on that.
Yeah, I don't know what you do, because, again, you're not going to fire Mario Cristobal for this. I know in the aftermath immediately of that, it felt like the popular sentiment among Hurricanes fans, but trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets, and my man kicked over that bucket and hasn't picked it up yet. Coming up next, let's get to our alma mater and what went wrong this weekend for Notre Dame, and take a look at our all-weekend team of the top performers we saw next here on GoJo and Golic. All right, Dad, before we get to our all-weekend team here, probably time to address the Notre Dame-sized elephant in the room. Notre Dame went on the road for its third straight undefeated top 25 night game matchup and finally seemed to run out of juice. Louisville gets a 33-20 win in this one. And, Dad, there were some things we knew about Notre Dame going into this game, right? Notre Dame had struggled tackling all year. Some of that showed up in this game. But to see the offense now, ever since the Ohio State game, it's almost like in a movie when someone bumps their head and gets amnesia and you spend the rest of the movie trying to get them to figure out who they were and what they've been. Ever since that Ohio State game, going from there to the Duke game and then to this game as Louisville, the offense just looked out of sync. There's no separation downfield from the receivers. This was Sam Hartman's worst game in a Notre Dame uniform. He finally throws an interception and follows it up with a couple more against a Louisville team that knows all about taking the ball away from him in this game. It seems so uncharacteristic for them, but going back and look at it, Dad, really, I think it boils down to two things. Tackling on one side's been an issue, but it's been an issue Notre Dame's defense has overcome to great effect so far. Statistically on the season, Notre Dame was a bad situational football team yet again in this game. Third and shorts continued to undermine this Notre Dame offense, and then those interceptions by Sam Hartman. It's actually why I felt a little more hopeful about what this team is still capable of after watching the game, because I didn't get to see it live. I was down between the Hedgens and Athens for Georgia, Kentucky. But watching it after the fact, without all the noise in the background, saw a team that, man, if you can figure out third down play calling and how you execute in those moments and whatever the offensive line rotation was that was going on, this is still a group that I think can go out there and compete at a high level, because I'm counting on Sam Hartman not having that kind of blow-up game again where a few balls sail and all of a sudden wind up in Louisville defender hands.
Yeah, first and foremost, congrats to Louisville.
Yeah, man, Jeff Brom.
Last year, Sam Hartman was with Wake Forest, and when they played Louisville, Wake Forest was number 10 in the country. Louisville beat him, 3 interceptions, Sam Hartman. This time, Notre Dame number 10, Sam Hartman, the quarterback, 3 interceptions as well. And he lost 2 fumbles, so 5 turnovers. It was his worst game at Notre Dame. You're right about that. But the O-line has not been very good. The tackling, as you mentioned, Notre Dame has lived with for a little while, but has been able to come out of it on the other side. Some of the play calling on third and short and forgetting play calling, then execution, there's 2 sides to it, has not lived up at all, especially with what you think of what you have with this offensive line and this running game. So it was surprising to me. I thought in the second half when Notre Dame got the turnover and kicked the field goal and went up 10-7, I thought, okay, Notre Dame, what they do, they can start slow and then they start to lean on you. And I thought that's what was going to start to happen, but it didn't. All credit to Louisville and what they did. Their running game was absolutely incredible with the kid who Joar Jordan ran for 143 yards. That dude is a home run almost any time he touches a ball. He's a threat. So congrats to them. And Notre Dame, listen, we've talked about this. They're out. 2 losses. You're not in the 4 playoff system. When you get to 12, possibly you have a shot. But they're out with 2 losses. So now it's play for pride, play for a New Year's Six Bowl if you can run the table. But now you have USC coming in, who, by the way, had a triple overtime game against Arizona. So they had a tough one of their own and a bad defense coming in to South Bend. So we'll see how that one ends up. But it's a shame because every player and every coach knows, and every fan, you get 2 losses in this day and age in the college football playoffs and you're not in a conference, you're not going to make the playoffs.
It feels tough because it's the one year we've got Sam Hartman, and now that feels like that opportunity has been lost here, but still an opportunity to go forward, be a double-digit win team. You mentioned SC coming to town. Either the Notre Dame offense or the USC defense is going to have the get-right game of the all-time, because that has been stoppable force meets movable object. For Notre Dame, got to get the interior of the offensive line figured out and got to get the identity figured out here. You mentioned leaning on them. I don't know if we saw consecutive runs called the entire night, even allowing for the game script there. I think you got to get back to trying to bruise people up front and make that your identity, even with the quarterback that you have, because right now, receivers just not giving you as much production as you would need to be a consistent downfield passing team. All right, Dad, now that we've purged our feelings let's get to some positives.
Before we move on.
Oh, no.
GoJo, you said that you didn't get to, you didn't get to see it live. Obviously, you were a little busy between the hedges there. What did you do? I've heard that you've broken things physically when you found out about Notre Dame losses. What got broken? What was in your vicinity?
Oh, no, this is total dissociation. Oh, I'm at the point now where I could stop like once I saw what was going on, so I'm sitting in the press box, I'm watching Georgia and Kentucky, which, good God almighty,
wow,
Georgia. They're the number one team in football.
Yes.
Like, we have very few things that we can be certain of in a college football season that's been this chaotic. It's Georgia and Michigan right now, and then a pretty hard line, and everybody else in terms of who I trust, because that team went out there and railroaded a pretty solid Kentucky squad. They've got some questions about the passing game of their own right, but Georgia looked every bit like the team finally been waiting. They had 17 first quarter points on the year, worst in the SEC coming into this game, and stormed out the gates. I think put 3 up in the first quarter of this game. So I was watching and I was seeing what football at the highest level looked like right now. This Georgia team's been the standard for the last 3 years. Athens, awesome environment, by the way. Mama's Boy, one of the favorite breakfasts I've had on the road in college football season so far. But Jesse, watching that and then seeing and hearing what was going on in the Notre Dame game and knowing 2 losses meant they were out of the playoff race, it allowed me to kind of take a step back and go, all right, the fan part of my brain can now X off those top end hopes for the season. Notre Dame is not going to be a playoff team now this season. And so I achieved a state of zen that comes with that release of finally letting go of the expectations associated with your team. I had allowed myself to buy in, get hurt again, open myself up to that potential pain, and I felt the full brunt force of that pain at the Ohio State game. The people that saw me in the Graduate Hotel in Eugene, Oregon, I am so sorry you had to watch a man fall down trying to crow hop and throw his hat into the wall. But everybody in that locker room in Athens, Georgia, got to see me at my very best, which is resigned to our fate and then trying to go about finding answers, because the one thing that can't happen now, Dad, for Notre Dame is you can't let this season spiral. There are already going to be enough vultures circling around the message board circles for Marcus Freeman and company here as a head coach in year 2 of ever being a head coach right now is hitting some adversity yet again in a season. It didn't come at the hands of Marshall like it did last year or a hapless Stanford team. These have been good top 25 teams that we're talking about here, and a Louisville team that is undefeated and absolutely going to factor into what's becoming a crowded ACC slate right now. But if you're Notre Dame and you go out here after USC looked lost against that Arizona team in triple overtime, even offensively not looking quite themselves, you cannot come in and lose this game, but you certainly cannot let Caleb Williams and company come in and go out and embarrass this game, or else the conversation is going to get very uncomfortable in a way that I don't think should be happening. I want to be abundantly clear. I trust Marcus Freeman and this coaching staff. I believe in what they're doing. But right now, you're at a very critical juncture in the early life cycle, because for a lot of people, this is going to be the official end of that honeymoon phase there. And this is another very tough test. We talked about this team feeling gassed because of the stretch they're in. It doesn't get any easier. I saw Big Noon Saturday is going to be there. This is still a game with a lot of juice for a lot of people. And so it's going to be an important resume point for everybody involved.
It is, because you wondered after the Ohio State loss, how did they come out in the next game? And Duke, it was a fight, but they came out and they showed resilience and get the win. Okay, how are they going to do against Louisville? Did not look good, but now it's period, end of paragraph. Any playoff talk is over. So now how do you respond? Now that's Marcus Freeman and the coaches and the leaders of that team. How do you respond now? Okay, that goal we had is now done. But you do have USC coming in. If you go to Notre Dame, you understand Notre Dame, USC, and what that means. So how quickly can those guys turn that page, as you mentioned, 4th night game, 4th undefeated ranked team. But, hey, that's the way it lines up. You know, you got to go play it. So that's going to be the interesting thing to me, is the resilience. Didn't show up last week in Louisville. Congrats to Louisville. What happens now when your destiny has kind of been set from the side of, okay, we're not getting to this goal? How do we respond?
I think there's enough pride in that locker room from everybody involved, of players and coaches alike, that have been a part of high-level winning seasons around there, who are used to the standard for preparation. I think you've got the right leadership for all of that to happen, but for both sides, right? USC and the other side, Lincoln Riley in that locker room is looking at that team and probably can accurately say to them, if we continue playing like this, we're not going to be in a position to be a college football playoff team, to even win a Pac-12 championship, as we've got Oregon and Washington set to battle this weekend that look like the front runners for that right now. Lots on the line for both teams, heading into one that's certainly going to be frosty in South Bend. Coming up next, we'll get to those all weekend teams now that I'm done ranting and bloviating next year on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jesse Cofield. It is time for the guys to give us their all-weekend team, taking a look back at everything that went down and who is going to get the honors. So we will start with honorable mention, move to second team, and then finally you guys will give us your first team picks. Gentlemen, take it away.
Yeah, the all-weekend team here. Very excited for this one because there's so much to get to usually on the body of a Monday. We want to make sure we celebrate as many people as possible who've been balling out here. His dad's already waving his finger at me. What do you want?
Mike, I just want to say I'm proud of you. Jesse prompted you last segment about Notre Dame. You sounded like you were sitting in a therapist couch just unloading. And I'm glad we could use this as a way for you to feel a little bit better. Because I was worried too. I have the Learfield, booth cam on, and I know you check scores, and I was waiting to see something get thrown against the wall, and it didn't. And your whole, I mean, you gave me a nice 5-minute break there because you just kept going and going, and I just thought your therapist would have earned their money on that one to try and make yourself, at ease a little bit.
So am I on your all-weekend team, or is my therapist in this hypothetical situation on your all-weekend team based on this performance?
Am I your therapist?
Always your therapist. Yeah, Jesse should be your therapist, but always your therapist because they have to listen to you talk nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, listen, I have a lot of feelings about this team, but I've arrived at the Zen-like state behind the waterfall, and so I will award myself second team honorable mention status coming off the weekend for being able to process this victory like an adult and rationalize by saying we are just third and short offense away from being a much better football team, which is a totally normal, not college football brainworm thing to say coming off that Notre Dame loss to Louisville. I'm not wrong. You're wrong. Leave me alone. We're going to unravel if we keep pulling at the thread too long here. Let's get to the first team all weekend pick, Dad. Cooper Kupp from the Los Angeles Rams, my pick here. His first game back.
You said first team. This was honorable mention. Correct?
I think honorable mention is my first pick. I don't know. Cooper Kupp, honorable mention, all weekend team, coming off his first appearance of the 2023 season, albeit in a losing effort against the Eagles, which is why he's not higher on this list. But Dad, they came out firing. It felt like he caught every pass on the opening drive of this game. He finished 8 catches for 118 yards. We saw the effect it had, still opening up passes for Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell in that offense. But Matthew Stafford clearly missed his boy. They got him in a bunch of option routes in the middle of the field, and those two just cooked against a Philly secondary that certainly had some of it struggled this year, is definitely injured in the slot and had trouble covering that. But it was great to see for Cooper Kupp, who the headlines we were hearing out of training camp about that hamstring injury and potential nerve stuff were really harrowing. And now he's back on the field and looks balling again.
I mean, it was like just pick up where you left off. The dude
Unreal.
Just gets open. I mean, his inside routes, they're giving him the inside. He's taking the inside, and it just looks like pitch and catch. It's stunning how it's just back to normal. For them, though it was a loss against the Eagles on that one, but good to have him back on the field.
Although I will say, after seeing this and the way the rest of the NFC is looking right now, I think in the expanded postseason, the Rams are going to be a playoff team. That's the thing I came off the last couple of weeks. I think the Rams are going to find a way in a 17 playoff in the NFC to make the postseason. That looks like a team and has looked like a team that's been a tough out all the way through. I know Aaron Donald didn't have a sack last night and hasn't in his last 5 games against the Eagles offensive line, but with the rest of that conference being what it is, I think that team does have what it takes, especially if Cooper Kupp's going to keep looking like that in this passing attack.
I agree. And a lot of that probably is because of the way the conference looks. It's not a strong conference at all. So I would agree there. My honorable mention is going to go to Formula One and Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen. And I don't know, Jesse, if you Qatar, I mean, are we accepting different pronunciations? Is it one for sure?
I've heard it both ways.
Yeah, I have as well. So that's where they were with the race. He just needed the sprint race on, I believe it was on Saturday, to lock up his 3rd straight driver championship. He has won 13 of his 16 races this year, 48 races overall. They still have a handful of races to go in the season, and he has already wrapped up his 3rd title. He is about as dominant as you could be in your respective sport as there is in sports right now. I would be hard-pressed to think, I'm just trying to do it off the top of my head, of any sport out there who's dominant right now that would be more dominant than Max Verstappen. And nobody comes to mind right now. That dude is absolutely on fire. So congrats to him for his 3rd straight championship.
Max Verstappen's arrived at the UConn women's basketball problem where he's become so dominant that people have nothing else to talk about other than, is he actually bad for the sport, making it as completely unfun as it's been, knowing the outcome of basically every race. So seems like the existential problem for Formula One going forward, but I think we got the Vegas race coming up here in the near future, and that should at least erase some of that with shiny toys.
By the way, let me tell you, if anybody's coming to Vegas in the next week or so, man, make sure you put time up because there is construction going on here. It's going to be awesome, the race out here, but what's going on in the ancillary part of this, of the construction and preparing for it, wow. Traffic's a mess. Getting to and from the airport's a mess. So if you're coming out here, make sure you have time.
I am excited to see how they incorporate the Sphere into the race. Yes. As the Sphere
they should
has
have to
become
drive
the unquestioned star.
Yeah.
Oh my God. They should do anything with it. The Sphere has become the star of the Las Vegas Strip. It is incredible. But Dad, let's get to our second team all weekend picks. I'm going to go with Colts running back Jonathan Taylor, who snuck up on me sitting around on a college football Saturday. And all of a sudden I look up and Jonathan Taylor's got himself a big fat payday that we were all never sure was going to come. It was so much animosity between him and Jim Irsay and the Colts this offseason. All these weird cryptic quotes about how if he's gone and I'm gone, the NFL will keep moving on and it'll forget us. And 3 years, $42 million later for Jonathan Taylor, Dad, he gets what he was looking for here. This is a win for Jonathan Taylor, a win for running backs coming off of this holdout, his time on IR, where he came back this weekend, came off IR. Ironically, Zach Moss, his running back roommate, ends up being the star of the show, going off for over 100 yards in a win that Gardner Minshew has to step in because Anthony Richardson now looks like he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a grade 3 AC joint sprain in his shoulder after another tough run there. So maybe all the more reason you're glad you signed Jonathan Taylor to get back for more firepower in that backfield to bolster you in the meantime, Dad. This is the right shape of deal for a running back in the NFL right now, Dad. Just a little bit over in practical guarantees what Derrick Henry got from the Titans all those years ago that I maintain should be the model for teams that have young, incredibly productive running backs who they want to maximize in their prime.
So I don't know why this deal didn't get done earlier. I don't know where the numbers were. I'm sure they're close to what the numbers are now, and everybody has decided this is a thing to do at this point. It was a good deal for him, and as he said, he thinks it helps running backs. We'll see. Hopefully their value can go back up. But you're right about Zach Moss and the performance he had. Good for him. That being one of the reasons maybe that backs aren't getting the big deals because somebody else steps in and continues to do a decent job there. But happy for him. And as I have been saying all along, I never understood why they didn't get it. They did, though. And as I also, even if they did it before the season, he still was going on the PUP list, so he wouldn't have been playing. But to have him and Anthony Richardson, though Anthony Richardson is going to have to start watching himself, which is tough to do because his game is when he runs, he's a physical runner, but now twice. Once a shoulder, before a head injury when it banged off the turf of missing time. Now he's going to miss some significant time here, it looks like. So
how worried about that are you, Dad? Because we've seen what's gone on with Jalen Hurts, right? Who missed games at the end of last year in a season where they ended up going to the Super Bowl dealing with a shoulder injury that lingered through the postseason. He's dealt with injury before and been involved in more designed rushes, Jalen Hurts, I mean, than any quarterback in the NFL since he's gotten into the league. And so for Anthony Richardson and that Shane Steichen offense, we expected more of the same. He's an incredibly gifted physical player. They might have to tailor it some, but that's the offense that you're going to and should run with that player at the helm.
As I said, while Lamar Jackson's passing has been better, he's still going to run the ball. Josh Allen is still going to run the ball. If teams with a quarterback like that are going to get where they want to go, their quarterbacks, including Anthony Richardson, are going to have to run the ball. Now, how are you when you run the ball? Can you avoid some contact? You're not going to avoid it all. It's the NFL. These guys are fast and they're going to hit you hard and they're going to land on you. So he's in for a career like this where we could see flashes of wow and then say, oh man, I hope he gets up. But that's who he is as a quarterback as he grows into this league. We'll see how the running grows into this league, but they're not going to get where they want to go without him running the ball as well. So they're always going to be able to live it with that. Speaking of running the ball, my second team is going to be the brotherly shove and Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I mean, right before half, we see the brotherly shove on the goal line for a touchdown. Actually, Hurts has his most carries and yards, 15 carries, 72 yards. In this game, in this win over the Rams. But we've seen other teams try it, some successfully. Giants actually got 2 guys hurt on the play. Do you think, I listen, you know me, as a former defensive lineman, I can't stand the fact that the league has just completely turned a blind eye to helping runners and just pushing them forward. I think it's ridiculous, but also it's for the offense. So we know at this point that's what they're going to do. Do you think there's any chance that the league outlaws this play?
It seems like it's trending that way, which seems lame as hell because, again, it's one team that's good at it. Nobody else has displayed an aptitude for this at a high level. Dallas did successfully do it once last night, and since we've had a successful one for the Bears, which I wanted to dub the Bear Crawl, and in Chicago, so Chicago gets the Bear Crawl. Dallas did it last night. I want to call it the Texas Two Cheek. So we've got great names for these and the few teams that have been able to be successful. But, Dad, those have been few and far between. The Giants got hurt because they couldn't execute it at a high enough level. I don't see those as reasons to go out here and outlaw something just because one team is good at it. It's different. Remember league-wide when we saw too many teams, it was an obvious, easy extra point try. It was not a play that felt worth it in football anymore because so many kickers were so good at it that they backed them up and they introduced a little bit more variability into that play. It's one thing if it's ubiquitous, but it's not. This just seems like Hayton at this point, and Hayton shouldn't be rewarded at the highest levels like the NFL's about to do, bailing everybody out with this play.
Well, you know me. I would hope they outlaw it just because as a former defensive player, I hate seeing it. But I overall, I would have to agree with you. And because one team's so successful at it is not a reason to outlaw it and say you shouldn't be able to do it. You know,
again,
it's up to the defense to find a way to stop it. And the one thing you can't do, I've seen guys like linebackers or safeties jump over the top to try and get their hands on Jalen Hurts. Well, that's not going to work because now you're in the air. He is just going to, and everybody's going to drive you forward. You have zero leverage to actually stop him going forward. If your feet aren't on the ground pushing the other way, they're just going to give you a ride for a yard or two.
Yeah, you get to go crowd surfing a little bit, which is fun. We love crowd surfing in sports.
Do we?
This is eerily reminiscent, Dad, of in Semi-Pro, the movie with Will Ferrell, where Jackie Moon throws the first alley-oop in a game, and the referee just blows the whistle, and it's like, you can't do that. You just can't do that. Why? Because you can't. That's the only explanation and the only reason we can get so far. Once you got the butterfly effect from the Bush push that led us all to this moment, you allowed us collective football for those years, this to simmer and stew. And just because they're better at it than everybody else doesn't mean you get to come in and pull the ripcord now, as this does feed into, as we talked about with Jalen Hurts, the most rushes by an NFL quarterback in his first 3 seasons. Jalen Hurts trails only Lamar Jackson, according to ESPN stats and info. He's ahead of even Cam Newton by multiple rushing attempts, which is saying an awful lot about that team. So keep pushing butts out there. Very fired up Jason Kelce on the sideline during that game, by the way. Sexy Batman over. which it is funny. We spend a lot of time, Dad, talking about coaches. Nick Saban was in the news a lot lately talking about showing players up on the sideline, and the NFL college dynamic's totally different. But if this had been a coach doing that to players, people would have been mighty uncomfortable. It's a reminder, this is the love language of the sidelines in the NFL, where you've got professionals trying to work through problems in very heated environments. Sometimes you get stuff like this. Everybody involved loves each other. Everybody involved there knows what Jason Kelce is about, but he looked ticked off about something, and I want to know what it is.
Listen, Jason Kelce is about as intense a player as I've ever seen, especially up close and personal when I'm doing their games and on the sidelines before and seeing him. So when he gets that animated, I bet everybody really is kind of like, oh, wow, what the hell happened for him to go off like this? And I'm going to stay away from him.
And I mean, poor Jeff Stoutland. We always talk about usually the thing is you don't put your hands on the merchandise either way. And he was demonstrating a block. He wasn't physically accosting him. But Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach, who I'm sure that has happened on the practice field plenty before. And Jeff Stoutland is beloved by that group. I would be stunned if it's not Travis Kelce presenting Jason at his Hall of Fame enshrinement, if it's not Jeff Stoutland being the one to do that honor. But in that moment there, Jeff's like, oh, this thing, he's like, I know where this is going. I know Jason Kelce enough. I better brace my chest and get ready to go for this. I remember in walkthroughs in Pittsburgh when I was a rookie there, Marquise Pouncey in walkthroughs, every time when we were going through pass plays, he would punch you like he was punching you in a game. And so all of us rookies who had to play scout team D tackle when that was going on, you'd be up there and you'd just be tense in your chest the whole time, getting ready to take a punch in the chest from a guy who's an all-pro and maybe a fringe Hall of Famer in his own right. So I know what Jeff Stoutland was going through there, and it's not fun.
And I will say, as far as Hall of Fame induction, I do think that Travis would introduce Jason, but I think we all know that Taylor Swift will introduce Travis.
Oh, yeah, listen, the Hall of Fame trajectory their relationship is on, only a matter of time. Welcome to Canton. God, that would be a zoo, by the way. Oh, man.
Oh, my God.
Dad, let's get to our first team all-weekend picks here. This one was easy for me. The Red River rivalry at the Texas State Fair, which is one of my favorite places on this earth. I saw them doing deep-fried fireball shots this last year, Dad.
Is there anything fried you wouldn't try?
Wait. How do you have a deep-fried fireball shot? Is it a...
Glad you asked. I saw the picture of it because they do deep-fried Coca-Cola. They deep-fry everything down there. Sticks of butter, Oreos, pizza. It's heaven on earth. This is the artery-clogging Valhalla for fat people like me. But the deep fried fireball shot was quite literally just a piece of fried dough inside of a fireball shot, which, Dad, I'm a man with very few limits at the table. That might test them there, because the thought of trying to choke down something physically like that and also get the shot of fireball in there seems like it's a recipe for a certain gag reflex if you're not careful in that environment.
I would do it. I would absolutely do it without question. So I ask both of you. Jesse, I'll start with you. Pick the food you hate the most. Would you try it deep fried?
Oh, hell yeah.
I'm thinking my mind goes to liver, because I think liver is disgusting. So deep fried liver. I mean, I would try it because I wouldn't like people to say that I was being lame about it. So I would try it, but it would be because of peer pressure.
Isn't that isn't that Rocky Mountain oysters, Dad? Isn't that deep fried bull testicles or deep fried bison testicles? Yeah, I feel like I would try that.
If it's deep fried, close your eyes, take a bite.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That's exactly right.
Oh, God. It's just a delightful combination of flavors.
Have a funnel cake. I'd rather just have a funnel cake.
Oh, I'm with you there.
Man.
Nothing like
funnel cake.
Think of the bellyache you're going to get, though. Deep fried butter sticks and oh, my God.
The Texas State Fair pushed me physically in ways that I was not ready for, because we went down there and got to be out there around this game with the radio show a few years ago, Dad. But in this game here, one of the most chaotic rivalries in the sport, Oklahoma and Texas playing their last installment of this as members of the Big 12. They're getting ready to shift over to the SEC next year. You saw Greg Sankey was in the house there, Brett Yormark, spite refusing to attend this game, the current Big 12 commissioner. But that didn't matter for one Dylan Gabriel, who didn't get to play in this game last year. He was hurt for Oklahoma in a game where they got boat raced by the Longhorns. And, Dad, he comes back this year, 23 of 38 for 285 and a touch through the air, 14 for 113 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and orchestrates one of the most memorable final drives in Oklahoma and Texas history to pull off the win in this game, to vault them into the playoff conversation and vault himself into the annals of history down there in Norman, Dad. That was a gutsy performance from that kid.
That drive was unbelievable. And listen, they're a fast-paced team as is, so them going 100 miles an hour is nothing new to them. But the ease of which they went down that field was stunning to me. And what a game. That was the best game, I thought, of the weekend. It was absolutely incredible. So congrats to Oklahoma on getting that win. My first team is going to go to a man that helped me secure the title in our DraftKings fantasy games we play on Sunday. One Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals. Jamar Chase, 15 catches, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. More importantly, 55 points for my fantasy DraftKings team, which vaulted me to the top. We have to just play out the string tonight, but I will be the winner because of Jamar Chase. So, and hey, welcome back Cincinnati Bengals offense, which was the worst in the league, to Joe Burrow throwing for 317 in this one, 3 touchdowns, and Jamar Chase, 19 targets in this game. As he said, he's like 7-Eleven. He's always open, and he sure showed it.
Hey, listen, man, if you're a wide receiver in the NFL right now and you're not making a stink about not getting targets the way we saw A.J. Brown do and then continue to get rewarded for, and now Jamar Chase, do you really even care about being great? Got to ask the question in that case, because I think we know what the answer is at this point. The squeaky wheel got the grease. Joe Burrow looked incredible in a way that I think raises the expectation for the Bengals. Back to, they might do this. But coming up next, we will see if any of that expectation lives where Dad is in Sin City as we get ready for Monday Night Football here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We have 2 teams looking to recover from losses on Monday Night Football. We got the Packers visiting the Raiders. Raiders 1.5-point favorites at home in Vegas. As for what to expect in this one, we had 2 of the worst running teams in the league, which is fine. That's fine, right? Because all eyes are going to be on the passing game. They are both questionable, but we might get a Davante Adams versus Jair Alexander matchup, and it is extra spicy, fellas, because Davante Adams is playing Green Bay for the first time since leaving the Packers. And, you know, he's got a few things to say about how things ended with his former team, and it might not be what you think.
Yeah, I mean, we ended in a good place. I still, not frequently, but I still speak to, you know, the front office guys over there. I checked in on Matt in the offseason, hit him on his birthday. All the coaches over there I love, the ones that are still there. So, you know, the players, obviously they understood the situation as well. So it wasn't some big crazy breakup that people thought it was. Obviously there was, it felt like it just because everything seemed good a week ago, and then, you know, obviously I was gone. But a lot of love and respect, mutual love and respect between the Packers and I.
Setting the record straight, wasn't some big breakup that everybody made it out to be.
Yeah, definitely the thing you say when it definitely 100% wasn't a big, tough breakup where everyone felt weird about it on the backside there. That being said, Dad, I mean, going into this game, and you're going to be on the call for Westwood 1 tonight, you and Ryan Radke getting set to go there in Sin City. This is an interesting one because it's going to be, hey, is Jair Alexander healthy enough to go? Right. Are a lot of the Green Bay Packers healthy enough to go in this game tonight? As on both sides, Jimmy Garoppolo coming out of the concussion protocol, these are beat up teams in key areas that have so far undermined a lot of their attempts for success this season.
Yeah, and I'm doing just a quick thing. I'm doing the game with Kevin Harlan. It's a Monday night game. I do this.
Oh, my mistake there. Ryan cheating on Ryan a little bit.
Kurt Warner called the London game, so that's usually is with Kevin. So I'm going to jump with Kevin this time around. But you're right. This is, you know, injuries. Jair Alexander's got the back. Davante Adams has the shoulder. So they're both a little nicked up already, a couple of players. Devondre Campbell and Zane Anderson out for this game. Campbell already missed a couple of games. But Jesse mentioned it, the running attacks. You would think both these teams, you had 2 years ago, the leading Russian league in Josh Jacobs, who has more receiving yards than rushing yards this year. Is the only back, by the way, this year that has over 150 rushing and 150 receiving in what he has done. But that's stunning to me. And then you get Aaron Jones back after missing a couple weeks with the hammy, and he runs like 5 times for 18 yards. So the running attack not going at all. And Garoppolo, as you mentioned, back after the concussion, so he'll be out on the field with Aiden O'Connell, the rookie from Purdue, got the start last week. And Jordan Love, who started out strong in his first couple of games, has not been too good in his last couple of games. He's been horrible in the first half. This has been a second half team. Hence, when they were down, 17-zip, and they come back and win 18-17. Was that against Washington, I believe, or New Orleans? I'd have to we'll look at that. That was against the Saints. Yes, against the Saints. So they have been a second half team. They need to get out of the gate a little stronger. And quite honestly, they might be able to do that against a Raiders team who has not been very good offensively and not been very good defensively. So these are two teams trying to kind of right the ship and get going in a certain direction. And they haven't been able to do it how they've normally done it. Because you think, again, of running the ball and Davante Adams passing to him. Now, Davante Adams is getting his, but they have no running game to speak of. And I've been really stunned at the lack of running a game. Now they have, as I said, been missing Aaron Jones. But he did come back, and they still aren't running the ball very well.
Well, for the Packers, I think so much of this points to you were expected to be a team led up front by your offensive line during this change, and David Bakhtiari now on IR, and it sounds like going to need another surgery and probably going to be done for the year.
He's done.
And
he is done for the year. Yeah. You have the other guys, Elton Jenkins, John Runyon, Zach Tom. You have.
Well, I mean, and Elton Jenkins is the second best offensive lineman on this team when healthy. Now, he was back practicing this week, but he's missed the last couple of games. He's incredibly versatile. And, Dad, once that group got compromised, I think that's where the struggles really started for this Green Bay team. Now, you get somewhat of a reprieve on the other side. Max Crosby lives there, so certainly that's a threat in the pass game. But it really, both these offensive lines sort of limping into this one quite literally. The Raiders last week gave up 6 sacks to Khalil Mack in a revenge game for the ages that looked dreadful. So you've got everyone limping into this. And, Dad, for the coach, Josh McDaniel, it feels like there's a lot of pressure in this game because we've talked about, and on this show, the decision-making in the Los Angeles Chargers with Brandon Staley, but with Josh McDaniel, decision-making in his games has also been a huge red flag so far this season for a coach that's trying to justify continued opportunities as a head coach for him in this league that so far he's spit the bid on.
Yeah, and I think we all agree that this is going to be his last stop as the head coach if it doesn't work out. You know, he's had the other stop in Denver, and now here with the Raiders, and it's certainly not going well, sitting at 1-3. They thought bringing Garoppolo in again. I think the third highest winning percentage in the regular season since he's been in the league, and it's just not coming to fruition here at all. A lot of grumbling going on out here in Vegas with how the team is playing. And Green Bay, you know, they already have one. I believe they beat the Bears. They've lost to the Lions already, but they're sitting at 2-2. They know this is a big game for them from a staying in contention in their division standpoint. The Raiders are not going to be. The Packers have a chance to be, because while we all love what Detroit is doing and how they've really turned the arrow up, it's not like it's a dominant, or I guess they're trying to get there. But that division still is not a dominant division. So the Green Bay is trying to stay within fighting distance of that one.
Well, and again, in that wild card picture where we talked about, I do think a team like the Los Angeles Rams going to be live dogs in the NFC. And so those are the things you're going to have to contend with in a lot of these divisions here, Dad. The Green Bay Packers, slight favorites according to ESPN's Football Power Index here. I need to see the line on this one. I don't have it right in front of me. Right now, the Raiders are a 1.5-point home favorite in this game. So just getting that edge there that I think comes with having Jimmy Garoppolo back. And, Dad, we saw clearly last week the gulf between Aiden O'Connell, who was a preseason star, who probably still has a chance to hang around in this league and be a productive player. But in a game where you're sacked 6 times, you don't really have a chance to get up off your ass and do anything. This is still an area where we expect the veteran capability of Jimmy Garoppolo to shine, even if we have seen that, hey, life outside of that Kyle Shanahan umbrella, not the most fun thing in the entire world.
Well, I mean, they were also a team that, you know, one week it's Jacoby Myers, and another week it's Devontae Adams, understandably so. But really, Hunter Renfrow has not been largely involved. Michael Mayer, the tight end they got in the second round, only has a couple of catches. He hasn't been really involved. And you keep hearing the coaches talking about, we need to get more people involved, and yet they don't. They haven't done it. Now, last week is tough, as you mentioned, with a rookie starting and Aiden O'Connell being on his butt most of the time, thanks to Khalil Mack. It's been difficult to do. But what's also would help is any kind of a semblance of a running game at all, which they're not getting. As I mentioned, Josh Jacobs more receiving yards than rushing yards. So he's been nice out of the backfield catching the ball, but they need to get a running game going to help out Garoppolo.
It's been a total abandonment of what their identity was last year. And I get it with the pieces involved that you mentioned. If I had Devontae Adams on my team, I'd want to throw him the football too. You know how bad it's got to be. Devontae Adams had, 175 yards receiving in their last game, and he still sounds upset about what's going on around there because he realizes and can see the writing on the wall. Like, Dad, if they lose this game at home, we're going to add Josh McDaniels' name to one of the coaches on the midseason hot seat that we talk about here. Brandon Staley, people can say what they want about the decisions or question them. The team's found a way to win, and coming up this week has a potential to be one of the more chaotic games known to mankind when they welcome the Dallas Cowboys in after that ass whooping for a Kellen Moore revenge game. But in the meantime, you're going to have Ron Rivera mentioned in that breath, and you're certainly going to have Josh McDaniel talked about in that breath if things keep up this way.
Listen, there's a chance this could start to spiral, right? And as I said, first half is key. That's usually when Green Bay can get got, but they do have the ability in the second half to come back. So even if they're down, don't count them out. But so let's see what happens in the first half. Can Green Bay actually jump out and do something early on in this game? We'll see. But I'm with you. Sitting at 1-3 with 1-4 staring at them in the face for the Raiders, this could absolutely start to spiral. I already heard Devontae Adams say, basically, you're wasting my years.
Yes.
You know, I'm the top receiver around here. You know, it ain't happening right now, and this ain't good. So, and as we've talked about many times, no new players are showing up. So how do you right the ship with what you got?
It's a great question. Coming up next, we'll try and right the ship with Kenny Albert, fresh off a trip across the pond as he gets set for 2 seasons colliding. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and very excited to welcome in our next guest, Kenny Albert, joining us here, fresh off of some NFL action this weekend, fresh into some NHL action coming up as we get ready to start that season on Tuesday. He'll be in Boston Wednesday to open things up there, but also promoting a book, A Mike for All Seasons, My 3 Decades Announcing the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, and Olympics, to which I say, Kenny, you didn't feel like adding anything else? It seems like you left a little bit of meat on the bone there.
Well, first of all, guys, thanks for having me on. And I was so excited to include you guys in the title, A Mike for All Seasons.
Honor,
well
truly.
done.
It means a lot
Well
that you would recognize the greatness of the top baby name of all time.
I have to imagine that I think another sport you'd want to add to your resume is when the Pro Pickleball Tour starts, that you would be the play-by-play for that to really add to the resume.
You know, it's funny. Somebody mentioned that last week as well. It's one of the sports that's not on the resume yet, but, you know, aside from the sports that are on the cover, one sport that I was once assigned to that, you know, I studied and watched prior events, but felt like I had no idea what I was watching was college wrestling. This was about 30 years ago. And I had a great color analyst, so he carried the night.
There you go. It's what is the approach going into that, especially as you're getting in, and you talked about this is over the course of 3 decades. You've got so much experience in so many of these fields now, but was there a sport that was the most daunting to you when you first started getting into this and first started doing the job at that level?
Well, I've been very fortunate to be involved in so many different sports, and growing up following the football, hockey, basketball, and baseball closely, but have been assigned through the years to some others that were definitely more challenging. I've done some boxing through the years, and there's no ball or puck, so that's a lot different than the others. And you also want to get a lot of your information, your good notes in early, because it could end at any time, right? So you can't kind of spread things out over 12 or 15 rounds. But was assigned to track and field and then volleyball at a couple of Olympics by NBC, and really loved the challenge. And this is a true story. I went out and I bought track and field for dummies. I bought volleyball for dummies. I would try to speak to as many people as possible, watch prior events. And before the 2022 Summer Olympics, when I called beach and indoor volleyball, and this was also off monitors during the back end of the pandemic, I was not actually there. We were up in Stamford, Connecticut, so that added to the challenge. But I actually sat down with our local high school volleyball coach at the high school where my kids had attended, and I said, can you fill me in on the strategy, the rules, the lingo, the history? And that was as helpful as anything that I had done, because in that 90-minute session, I just learned so much about it. But you rely a lot on the people around you, and I love the variety. So whenever I am assigned to a new, different sport, it's a challenge that I enjoy.
It is amazing, all the different sports you called. And for Mike and I, who are on the other side, we're the analysts, and we only do our sport of football. So it's way easier for us. So I ask this, I'm sure you've been asked this, of all the sports you do, which is the toughest play-by-play sport?
You know, it's funny, Mike, I get that question a lot, and most people would assume the answer is hockey, because it's speed, the quickness, the line changes during play, the names, right? A lot of the European, Russian, players from Sweden, Finland, et cetera. And I've worked 6 Winter Olympics on the hockey side, men's and women's. So, that's certainly a challenge, learning all the new names. But to me, the actual play-by-play call of hockey is the easiest, maybe because I've done it longer than any other sport now, over 30 years. The puck's in action the entire time. And I go back and forth between radio and TV. So on radio hockey, you're calling the action for 60 minutes. You're describing the play. The TV, you could pull back a little bit, give more time for the analysts to come in. Basketball is similar. It's slower, but it's 48 minutes. The ball's in action the entire time. More stoppages with fouls and the ball going out of bounds. Football is the most rhythmic. It's one play, and then it's 20 or 25 seconds. It's another play, and then it's 20 or 25 seconds. Now, when I worked in a 3-person, not booth because Goose was down on the field, but when I worked with Moose and Goose, Darryl Johnston, and the late, great Tony Saragusa for 8 years, Goose's mic was open at all times. So we couldn't see him. He couldn't see us, but I was always amazed at how little that they actually talked over each other, stepped on each other. I would set up the play, call the play, quick recap, and then get out of the way for my 2 partners. With a two-man booth or two-person booth, it's a little bit easier. Baseball, to me, is the most challenging. I only do about 10 or 12 games a year, so you're not really in the rhythm as if you were a team broadcaster working every night. And there's so much downtime between pitches and between batters. Now, this year, it changed a little bit with the pitch clock. I thought it was great, from a broadcast standpoint. It moved a lot faster, and you didn't have as much time to fill, because in a typical baseball game, the ball's only in play for about 8 or 9 minutes. So there's a lot of downtime as opposed to the other sports.
It's incredible. There's going to be so much great information in this book. Again, everybody needs to make sure they check this out here. A mic for all seasons, my 3 decades announcing the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, and the Olympics. Speaking of calling football, you were on the broadcast this weekend for the Dolphins and Giants game here. Coming away from that, Daniel Jones taking even more hits in this one. How worried should Giants fans be about the trajectory of their current quarterback?
Right. I mean, you look at the last 2 games, Monday night against Seattle and then yesterday in Miami, Giants offensive line just decimated with injuries. And you feel so bad watching Daniel Jones. And he got hurt in the fourth quarter yesterday as well, suffered a neck injury, came out of the game. But he was sacked 10 times on Monday. The Dolphins had 7 sacks yesterday. And Saquon Barkley didn't play for the 3rd straight game. So, it's a team that went to the playoffs, obviously, won a road playoff game last year in Minnesota, had such high hopes heading into this season. Schedule didn't do them any favors with Dallas, San Francisco, Seattle, Miami for the first 5 weeks. But with the 3 starters out on the offensive line, and then yesterday during the game, 2 other offensive linemen were injured, came out. One of them came back in. So you definitely have to feel for Daniel Jones. Defensively, they did force 3 turnovers. They didn't have any takeaways over the first 4 games. So that kind of kept them in the game for a while. They had the big interception return, 102 yards for a touchdown late in the first half. But Miami on the other side, just so impressive, their offense. We met with them on Friday, sat down with Coach McDaniel and Tua and some of the others. And, I talked about baseball speeding up with the pitch clock. The speed of the Dolphins yesterday, watching Tyreek Hill, Devon Achane with the 76-yard touchdown run, Jalen Waddle. I mean, it was just incredible. When you look at their numbers, record-setting over the first 5 weeks, most yards ever. They broke the 2000 Rams, had the most yards over the first 5 games, and they have a huge one coming up against Buffalo this coming Sunday.
Yeah, incredible speed on that team. You're right. Only got about a minute left, Kenny, and I always wonder in all the different sports you do, especially the names you say in hockey, has there ever been a name you just really had the most trouble getting?
Well, a quick story, the Olympics, I was a late addition to the roster in 2002, found out about 10 days before, and one of the first games was USA-China women's hockey, and they handed us pronunciations about 5 minutes before the game on the China side. Fortunately, the goaltender was nicknamed the Great Wall. She stopped about 70 shots in that game, let in 10 or 11 goals, but she was tremendous. So we went with the nickname on that one. There are a lot of challenging ones. I think the biggest, I talk about this in the book, there are players in every sport where the name changes from one year to the other. And we've sat down with players and said, how do you say your name? How does your mom say your name? Rich Seibert, a former offensive lineman for the Giants. Sometimes it was Seibert, sometimes it was Seibert. John Tavares, a great hockey player with Toronto. For years it was Tavares, then all of a sudden it was Tavares. So, back and forth on pronunciation. Some of them are pretty tricky, but, we write them down phonetically and hopefully they come out correctly on the air.
You mentioned the biggest key there. Whenever you got a polysyllabic name, you pray to God there's a nickname. You get through it once, and then you ride the nickname until the rails fall off for the rest of the night. It's incredible. Kenny, we can't thank you enough for giving us some time. Best of luck as you've got to navigate both of these seasons and worlds colliding here. And everybody, make sure you check out the book, A Mic for All Seasons, My 3 Decades Announcing the NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, and the Olympics. Thanks so much, Kenny. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, Mike and Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kenny.
Dad, it is always the thing I am most in awe of. You're right. As we sit in our chairs, the meathead tape grinders, and I watch these guys go from sport to sport in the midst of all of it, wondering how they keep it all together.
It's incredible.
Coming up next, we'll talk about dominance in Las Vegas on the hardcore next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Time to wrap this thing up the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off on in your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating. Check out anything you missed. Our thanks to Kenny Albert for joining us, promoting his book, getting ready to go for the NHL season, the NFL season. If you missed that, the whole interview's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. But Dad, Jesse, let's start off with this. The Vegas Golden Knights unveiling their Stanley Cup champion rings. They put out on the tweet, it's here and it is beautiful. The 2023 Stanley Cup champions have a ring that contains 12 carats of white and yellow diamonds. And the feature that we see often now on championship rings that I love has become sort of ubiquitous. It's got the detachable top that can, one, be worn as a pendant with the words, "It's nighttime" on the back. Great pun. And when removed, also has a replica of T-Mobile Arena where they play their home games inside. That's probably my favorite new innovation of rings, Dad. I love how gaudy and stupid these things have gotten. I love the idea of wearing a championship ring that is unavoidable to the human eye as you go off into the rest of the world. But to have this one that is now, one, multi-use, but two, also has the really cute little diorama inside, to me is exactly the kind of technological advances we need to be making around sports.
Well, I like the fact that they do something that then you can wear it. And most notably, like I'm just thinking of my situation that you know, your mother could wear. That because nobody's wearing these rings out unless they have an appearance somewhere, right? Because they look like trash can lids with millions of diamonds all over them.
You wouldn't wear it out all the time after you first got it? Oh my God.
You think I want to get rolled as I'm trying to get into my car and someone just cut my finger off and take my finger and the ring? No, hell no. So what I like is the fact that it's detachable and dependent, so your significant other can actually wear the pendant.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
It could be worn out. I think that's
you
really
wouldn't wear
cool.
the pendant? I'd wear the pendant. Why are you giving it to Mom so quickly here? You don't. So you're telling me a man who spent his whole life in pursuit of a championship that ultimately eluded you, if you achieved that great moment and you got to the mountaintop and you had the hardware, that you'd be like Jason Kelsey losing it in a sock somewhere? No way.
The hardware is not the important thing to me. That thing Mike, you see me. I wear a watch and a wedding ring. That's it. I don't wear anything more than that. Listen, there are 3 rings I wanted in my life: a wedding ring, a national championship ring, and a Super Bowl ring. I got one. I hit 333 on that one. But I am not that person that wears that kind of stuff, especially when it's gaudy like these championship rings are. And I get it. They should be, all the diamonds and everything. But I kind of dig the fact that you could detach something and somebody else could wear it. No, I would wear it at appearances and things like that. Other than that, that sucker would be in a sock drawer just like Jason Kelsey's.
Jesse, you noticed my dad said he batted 333, and he said, I got a ring out of it. He didn't say he got the most important ring out of that.
Oh,
Try and start trouble.
Man, makes
Don't
you
try and
wonder.
start trouble.
Your wife saw that. You better.
Well, I mean, you're the one starting trouble here. You're writing checks that your ass has to cash when you go home.
Speaking of gaudy, you know, there's a lot of jewelry stores in Vegas. You may need to pick something up for the wife.
Listen, we've been married 36 years, and I think we're past the point of trying to figure it out if it's going to work or not.
Yeah, no, the thought of you being back out in your own, hold on for dear life. If my mom left my dad, he'd be dead inside a week. Like, truly, I don't know how you would feed or clothe or get anywhere. I mean, you wouldn't be able to access any of your money because if you tried to sign a check at this point, the bank would call fraud.
Yeah, I would be out of money. I can feed and clothe myself. I can do that. But I never meet anybody else unless they came to my couch and were watching Netflix with me. That'd pretty much be it.
That's cute.
You know, that sounds like true love right there. Speaking of jewelry in Vegas, there's another team that might be in line for this pretty soon here, Jesse, as the Vegas Aces stormed out to a hell of a start in the WNBA Finals.
Yeah, finals are underway, and like you said, 99-82 in Game 1. We got two super teams out here, and the Aces are just dominating so far. And the celebrities showed out for this one, guys. LeBron James, Tom Brady, he obviously has an ownership stake in the Aces, and then Mark Wahlberg were among the celebs out there. And, you know, Senior, you said you didn't run into any of these guys in Vegas, in any of the, you know, you didn't see anybody in the lobby or anything like that?
I didn't, Jesse, but I do. The light is blinking on my phone, so I'm wondering if there's a message from one of the guys telling me,
it's probably
come
Tom.
on down. Maybe I missed that. Maybe I got in too late. So I didn't get the message from those guys. Could you imagine if I was walking as I was going in the casino last night, if I'd have seen LeBron, Tom, and Mark all in like the high roller room? I don't know if any of them gamble, to be honest with you, but it still would have been a sight. It was just like when I was in Tahoe for that golf event, seeing some of the power guys sitting in the high roller room, which I couldn't even walk into because of the minimum you had to put down on the table. But these guys would be pretty interesting because of all the money they have and watching them get after it.
Oh, yeah.
It's that kind of celebrity event right now. And obviously Tom Brady's got ownership stake in the Aces, like you mentioned, Jesse, but this is a big time matchup. We talked about the two super teams that are meeting out here, Vegas winning the opening stanza of this. But Dad, you look at the stretch that Vegas has coming up right now between the Aces right now in the WNBA Finals,
right?
Monday Night Football tonight in Las Vegas, and then the NHL season opening up there this week as well. It is a action-packed event as Vegas has become the center of the sports world in a lot of ways.
And the worst sporting event in all that may be the game I'm doing tonight with the Raiders compared to the Aces and compared to the Knights. I mean, just a minute. And how about these games? These are the two super teams. This is now the sixth time they've played. 4 in the regular season, 1 in the Commissioner Cup final, and this one, they've all been blowouts. I mean, they're two super teams. I would hope we get some close games, let alone a close series. They've all been blowouts.
And we've seen that. That's such a unique thing to basketball. I feel like in a lot of times, I remember a lot of those finals between Golden State and the Cavaliers, you'd have games that would go or series that would go 6 or 7 games, but they'd be 15 to 20 point blowouts within the body of each of those. And so that's kind of been the way it's gone. And Dad, you know this. I mean, we've seen this quite frankly in the NFL where when you've got two extremely talented teams, all it takes is a couple of mistakes early for the dam to break and for things to really get out of hand. The game script goes crazy, and you can get a team that piles and pours things on here the way that both of these teams have done at different junctures. So I'm sure by no means over because of all that firepower on the Liberty, but definitely a tough start there for the team coming from out of town. As again, we get set to kick off Aces yesterday, Monday Night Football tonight, and the Vegas Knights defending Stanley Cup champion season opener coming up tomorrow. But Jesse, not the only postseason events that we've got going on right now. Let's get to the third as we get a little bit of revenge game going on in the Major League Baseball postseason.
Yeah, Carlos Correa, he's back to his heroics, but this time it's against his old team. Bum, bum, bum. He had 3 hits, 3 RBI in Minnesota's Game 2 win over the Astros. He's performing the way we like to see him perform in October. And guys, with these stats, he has now passed Derek Jeter and David Ortiz to move into a tie for 3rd all-time on the playoff RBIs list with 63. Pretty impressive stuff going on, guys.
It really is. And Carlos Correa was the one. He had the whirlwind offseason with his free agency, where it was the will he, won't he sign that ultimately landed him in Minnesota for this opportunity here, Dad. And just in general, you look up at the scoreboard in Major League Baseball's postseason right now, that series tied 1-1. But the Baltimore Orioles that we were on here talking with Jared Carrabis about a while back, down 2-0 to the Rangers in their current series. The Philadelphia took a 1-0 series lead over Atlanta. Arizona getting ready to play one against the Dodgers out here tonight at Dodger Stadium. They lead that series 1-0. And so a lot of teams flipping the script on what we thought would be the power brokers in this postseason.
We had 3 100-win teams this year in order of wins. Atlanta 104, Baltimore 101, and the Dodgers 100, and they are 0 in their games right now. As you mentioned, Texas a 2-0 lead on Baltimore, the Phillies and Arizona 1-0 lead on Atlanta, and the Dodgers, they both play tonight. So we'll see if Atlanta and LA can even up that, because we've talked about it. And when we had Jared Carrabis on, if Atlanta doesn't pay this thing off, as I said, if they win the World Series, it might be relief before joy.
Yeah.
Considering where they are, that if they can't pay this off, of how dejected and what a bummer that would be for them.
Honestly, the feeling it felt like for the Dodgers way back when. And man, speaking of the Dodgers, felt for Clayton Kershaw. That guy just cannot get the postseason monkey off his back in so many ways. Such a Hall of Fame career, but another brutal outing in the postseason for one of the best to ever do it. They will try and right that ship tonight. We will try and get better overnight as well. Dad's going to see if he can go call this game without losing my inheritance at the blackjack table. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.